Welcome to Let Me Know How It Is, a pop culture podcast about TV, movies, comics, and all things geek. Today, we debate who is Superman's most important supporting character. Thanks for listening. So, way back in our 15th episode, we discussed which character was more important to the world of Batman, and we debated Joker, Catwoman, and Robin, who all happened to be celebrating their 80th anniversary that same year. That's not the case here, but we enjoyed the conversation that topic produced, so we thought it'd be fun to do it for Superman. So that's what we're doing today. I'm Zach Slater.
I'm Frank Melman.
This is Tommy Smithereens.
And I'm Clifton.
All right. So who is more important to the world of Superman? Our choices today are going to be Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, Jimmy Olson, and we're going to open it up to a fourth option for this one. We're going to say the Kents, Ma and Pa, together. So that's our choices for today. This can be, approached from whatever standpoint, story, publication, however we want to look at it. So Frank, you want to start us off?
So in thinking about the topic, I was kind of stuck because I couldn't tell for sure whether I wanted it to be Lex or the Kents.
Mm.
And I think I'm going to go with the Kents.
Okay.
Because Zach, you and I have talked many a time about how there's a lot of story mileage that you can get at having the Kents be around.
Yeah, sure.
And that basically when you think about the idea of there's been plenty of stories about Superman being, purely Kryptonian, and then what happens when he's not raised by the Kents, as well as we get to see like their input.
Yeah.
I think the Kents as a whole basically help shape him into being the person that he is.
Right.
You look at stories like The Nail, and when they're not part of things and how things go. In that one, things stay the same for a lot of characters, but for him, things are definitely different. I don't want to spoil the end of it.
Mm.
But yeah, I think the Kents are their contribution to the character is invaluable. I think they definitely humanize him in a way that I don't think that he gets that sort of thing. I think they help lay that foundation for him, and I don't think he's the same character without them.
What's a quick summary of The Nail?
Basically, it's for want of a nail. Basically, the Kents get a flat tire on the way to seeing the rocket land, and then by the time they get to where the rocket would have landed, Superman or Kal-El, the baby, is not there.
Okay,
someone else got to Kal-El first. So it's kind of like a world without a Superman story.
Yeah,
so he's raised without their influence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All the other superheroes pretty much. It's one of those things where it's not like the rest of the world is so completely different because he's not there, but his absence obviously is felt.
Okay.
Right. No, I don't listen. I don't disagree with you at all when it comes to the Kents. I think I was thinking about them, and I was kind of jazzed about this topic because Superman and Lois is on TV right now, which I'm kind of digging. But it hit me, if you don't read Superman comics and all you know is sort of Superman in television and Superman in the movies, right? Like, the Kents are always dead in all of those versions, right?
Or dying.
A lot of dead, dying funeral scenes.
At least Pa.
Right.
Almost always Pa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Jonathan Kent gets a lot of death scenes in comics. Not as much as Uncle Ben, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. And so I can see where, like, if that's what you know about Superman, to make the argument that it's them is kind of strange, right? But in the words of Bruce Timm on one of the Superman animated series special features, he was like, Jor-El and Lara from Krypton, his parents from Krypton, they give Superman his powers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan and Martha Kent, they give him his morality. And to me, that's the more crucial aspect to Superman, I think. More than any of the powers, more than any of that stuff, I think. Superman as a character, to be optimistic and to be hopeful is the most important thing. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I can see that. Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, I really, when I was, again, thinking about this, and I think of, like, the animated, we get to have Ma and Pa Kent, which is great. And then, Smallville, you get Ma and Pa Kent for most of that. And then like you said, with the Superman and Lois show, unfortunately, spoilers, Mom and Pa Kent aren't in it for very long.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was thinking about more, when I thought about more live action stuff recently that we have Mom and Pa Kent alive for, I was trying to distill what it is about the Snyder stuff that I really don't like that much. When I think about, and I'm talking about like Man of Steel and his Superman in general.
Mm.
And I realize it's not so much that, Superman doesn't get to be quite, or Henry Cavill doesn't really get to play Superman, because that's a joke I like to make all the time. It's like, it'd be great to see Henry Cavill play Superman, but we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
But really, it's more along the lines of, it's not a Superman problem so much it is a Ma and Pa Kent problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember in those ads, when we first started seeing the trailer for Man of Steel, and you had there's that great moment of Kevin Costner being like, I don't care what they, where you're from or what they say, you're my son, and that's basically all I need to know, right? And I love that. I'm like, that's Pa Kent. But then you also get the, the Ma Kent being like, you don't owe them anything line. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not like, that's not really who they are. Like you said, they help give him his morality. They help give him the knife. Like I said, they give him the foundation, and they show him how to be hopeful. And it doesn't. I mean, because then that's one of those. It's also for them the idea that they couldn't have kids, right? That was generally the storyline is they couldn't have kids, right? And that Clark is this miracle that comes in their life, and like they're both both of their all of their lives are better because he's in their life and they're in his life, right?
Yeah,
right.
That's usually the story. So I never that was one thing I just didn't get about Man of Steel, was the idea of why it had to be, why these people that were so hopeful and blessed to have him were, I mean, I understand not wanting to put your kid out there when he's having to fight, giant robots and Darkseid and all that stuff. Like you're worried about him, but at the same time, there's a certain aspect of that, being in the heartland and being those people that I think that kind of got overlooked, and also the whole thing of not finding a way. My Superman would find a way to save Pa Kent.
Yeah.
Like not to ruin Man of Steel, but he would have found a way to make it work.
Yeah. One of the things in Man of Steel, and this is going to tie into some of your points there, Frank, but one of the things that rubbed me wrong in Man of Steel was when the scene where Superman, is saying what his symbol means, and he's like, on my world, it means hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, in the movie, like you never even heard of this place, Krypton, until like 3 days ago. And now you're like saying it's your world. Like, no, you're a farm boy from Kansas.
Right.
And I think in a lot of the media, like they're so eager to jump into, and more so than I remember from a lot of comics I've read, but they're eager to jump in on like Jor-El by way of, artificial intelligence or whatever, still having strong influence over Superman. And I think that diminishes Ma and Pa Kent's influences, unfortunately, in the that we see over Superman, because I do think like the thing about Superman is that he's a farm boy. He's a middle American farm boy,
right?
And like that's where his nature comes from,
right?
And like he's got the abilities from his world, and like they were doing the best they could for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily need to see them still having such a heavy influence, like his Kryptonian parents, Jor-El especially, having such a strong hand over his upbringing. I don't need to see that much, because like he's just a farm boy, and that's all I need to know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, there's definitely one of those things of it's. I mean, there was more of an idea of. I mean, there's always that sense of, we've talked about it before, the idea that there's sense of loss and longing for what he didn't have, right?
Yeah.
And that he didn't have Krypton, and he didn't have his original birth parents. And, you get a lot of stuff in the Silver Age. You get a lot of like Jor-El's ghost stories, or Lara's, ghost stories, or like, long before they had holograms, there was just the idea of an image talking to him from beyond the grave kind of stuff. But I always wondered about that too, because a lot of times when we see, at least recently, and I said recently within the last, since like Man of Steel, you get a lot of like Superman going full Kryptonian, and it's just that cold alien sort of, take on Superman, where he's almost emotionless because of the way, I guess you'd have to trace it back to Byrne, because Byrne's idea was, this is a planet where they didn't really even, there wasn't even physical contact so much. It was more along the idea that, Superman was put in a gestation matrix and actually was born on Earth, even though he's technically Kryptonian.
Yeah. I hate that aspect of the Byrne stuff. I really do.
People do a lot of weird stuff with Krypton.
Yeah.
Well, we were watching Superman and Lois, and when I say we, my wife and I had seen the first one, and we watched the next one together, and we watched it all together again. And I said, what she's like, why is there all that fluid? Why is there all that water? And I explained the whole, it's probably going with the gestation matrix of being born on Earth. She's like, well, that's dumb. And I said, well, that's just one. It's just one take on the story, but it's one of those things where. Again, I think that he, so much of what he is not, it's that whole idea of, well, yeah, that's where you come from.
Yeah.
But that's not who you are. Right.
Yeah. Well,
and that's why
the reason I hate it, like I get what he's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying, like Byrne, I think in that moment when he was writing Man of Steel, the comic in the 80s, is I think that gestation matrix was a way to tie him more to Earth,
right,
than Krypton, which I get, and by and large I like as a concept, as a principle. I just think that, but I'm also big on the elegance of an idea, the elegance of a concept, and you take something so simple and then you complicate it, right? Like when we talked about like Shazam is such a simple concept,
right.
Right. And then when you complicate it with like, well, he's really actually like 5 kids now. Right. I'm like, no. Like keep it simple. Like he was a baby and you sent him over there. Like don't make me explain gestation matrix to anybody.
Sure.
Right. Right. On top of the fact that's not what people know.
No. Well, I mean, that's also the thing is like when they first brought after Crisis, when they first brought back when they first brought Supergirl back, and it was this whole thing of, well, she's from an alternate world, and there's all the, and that whole thing, and people were like, no. I think it was they were all the DC staff was at Six Flags, and they were going to ride the Superman ride for the first time, and they're looking at all the characters, and the characters have a synopsis for what they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And
someone looked at that synopsis for Supergirl about she's a protoplasm character, and then they're like, no, she should just be Superman's cousin.
Yeah.
And then they set to fix it in like the Loeb's Batman Superman story stuff.
Yeah. No, it's like it's one of the reasons though why I love Superman the animated series so much. It's that it's one of the areas in media where Ma and Pa are alive.
Right.
Right. And even here, I'll disqualify Smallville. Even though the whole show is built around that relationship.
Right.
Right. But it's also he's never Superman until the end of the show. And what I like about what I love about Superman the animated series is he's Superman.
Yeah.
And his parents are still alive. Yep. And he has them as a resource to run stuff over. And I think again, I know I'm talking a lot like if people haven't read a lot of Superman comics, but I think that, I don't think that that's uncommon these days. Right. And so I think if all you know is the TV and the movies and stuff, it can be a little funny to hear how Ma and Pa are always looming in the books, really,
right?
Even though they don't appear in every story.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like really, like the frequency those characters pop up is so much smaller than what you would believe if all you watched was the movies and television, where they're always there at some point and hinted at, right? Like somebody's always cast as Pa Kent to show up and die, right? Like in his arms.
You just know that heart attack is coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's kind of an interesting aspect to the characters too, is that like is in a way they're always there, even when they're not physically in the story whatsoever.
Right.
They're always a presence.
Well, you almost get, I mean, in rereading, if you go back and look at the early stuff, there's almost like not quite a Bruce Wayne, I will dedicate my life to fighting crime type moment, but there's definitely like a scene where he's crying at their graves, talking about how, I'm not sure if it's even close to like I said, the Bruce Wayne stuff. I think it's more along the lines of just like, I'm sad you're gone and now I have to go on and be a man kind of a thing.
Right.
I got to head to Metropolis and get this going. So, but I mean, one of the things I like about, more recent stuff, and like you're talking like Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's Secret Origin. Well, I didn't like all of it. I love the bit in it where, and it's an extension of the Loeb line of where someone, the kid tells him, cool costume. He's like, thanks, my mom made it for me. The idea that in that Martha touches the ship and she gets an image of what people on Krypton look like what their everyday, like what they wouldn't like, people on the streets of Krypton. when they were going from place to place, what their outfits and stuff look like.
Mm.
And it took a nice modern bit of the whole idea of her taking up. I explained this to my wife. I said originally the suit was made because that line in Superman and Lois where they have that in the opening about the thanks my mom made it for me line. The idea that Martha took apart his baby blankets, right?
Yeah.
And she re-sewed them back together out of that indestructible thread to make his costume, right?
Mm.
But in the Secret Origin one, what I love about it, there's a great bit in there where, because she has this vision of what people on Krypton look like, she figures that he should be able to wear his native clothing.
Mm.
And that's why she makes the costume look the way it does.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a lovely bit. Like, I think it's really, really nice and really, it's a nice modernization of that whole thing.
It is a good bit. And I'm never against Clark wanting to learn about Krypton. I think that that's very much in the character that he would want to know that heritage and right. And so it wouldn't die. But Clifton, I agree with you completely. I think that when you start steering the ship towards Jor-El and Lara so much, it does diminish, I think, Jonathan and Martha. And I don't think the trade-off is better.
Right.
No, I mean, when they had the big World of Krypton crossover, this was like in the early mid 2000s, where it was one of the last times we saw the whole thing. Where, like, it was basically like everybody in the books, like Superboy, Supergirl, all the Superman family, basically were together at that point, and they find like a lost group of Kryptonians, and then there's the idea of what are they going to do with all these Kryptonians, and you have a moment where Superman's sort of like playing up. He's basically, you get put in like different houses, and it's not quite just the House of El, but he has this moment where he's basically cast in the role of defending his father and what his father believed was going to happen to Krypton, and like no one listened to him, kind of a thing. And Zod is there, and it's one of the few times I like the idea of Superman playing up his heritage more, like Kryptonian.
Yeah,
because he's very much like, well, no, my father was right. People just didn't listen to him.
Right.
And the only other place I thought was cool was when Brad Meltzer does Justice League. I think it's in the Zero issue. It's the same idea of, my father wanted to save Krypton, but he couldn't do it alone. So therefore, that's why I'm part of something bigger than just me, which is like why he's part of the Justice League, which I thought was a nice idea.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite Jonathan Martha moments is from a book called Superman Krypton, which is written by Darwin Cook and art by Tim Sale. And it's kind of a Superman year one-y, sort of right. Maybe a year two-y.
Right.
Thing, I would say. And there's a moment where Superman has like this action sequence in a volcano, right? And it's kind of told over voiceover, and you see that he's talking about it, and he's at his kitchen in Smallville, right? And he's talking to Ma and Pa, and he's telling them about this ordeal. And it's like the first moment he as Superman was ever scared, and he didn't know like what the limits of like his invulnerability was, and he was actually like fearful that he could die in that moment. Right. And he's explaining it to them, right? Because I mean, they're the only people that know his secret, and he's the only one that they can talk to. And of course, like, he's afraid. He goes to Mom and Dad, and he's talking to him. And the bit that I love about it is, Jonathan, says like, "Hey, Clark, like, come out to the porch with me. I want to talk to you about something." And then so they go out to the porch, and then he's like, "Clark, I don't want you to ever tell your mom this kind of story again."
Right.
And it's just like, and it's so like familial. It's such a family scene that I love. Like, yeah.
The only thing I wanted to say about the animated is, as much as I love, Ma and Pa Kent, and they're still, around, if without the animated, you never get to see Ma Kent with a shotgun, and that's all I'm going to say.
Right. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite Ma Kent bits ever.
I'll take also really quick before we move on to I'll take one last shot at Man of Steel, the movie,
right?
Where I have heard people also say that didn't know anything about Superman,
right?
And when they're talked about the movie, they're like, yeah, like Pa Kent, like I didn't find him completely unlikable. And I'm like, if ever that is said about Pa Kent, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
There should be nothing about him that's unlikable.
You know? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you should always want to have a beer with Paul Kent while mending a fence or something.
Of course.
So, yeah. All right, so that's the Kent. So who should we? You want to go on to? Should we do Lois or Lex next? Any preference? Because Frank, you were saying that you were going back and forth between the Kents and Lex.
I'm going to go with Lex next. That's fine with me.
Okay. So what were you thinking for Lex? Like, why would it be Lex?
I mean, it's one of those things where Lex was when you go all the way back to the way early stuff, and it was when Siegel and Schuster were looking at doing the reign of the Superman stories, like kind of a pulp story. Their Superman was a bald guy who looked a lot like Lex. Granted, early on, Lex is like more of an evil scientist type, and he has red hair, and he's not quite the Lex that we know classically. But I think Lex is one of those characters that has been around almost the entire time. He's obviously, there's nobody else that's the top of the list for villainy for him, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's
no chance. Like nobody's close.
Like when they talk about arch enemies, like that's that guy. That's Lex Luthor. There's nobody else that's close.
I think some people would say Darkseid, but that's recent. That's all relatively recent. I think that's I think the animated series really beefing him up, and I think DC needing a big bad guy.
Right.
And people that came in on the late Super Friends.
Even though he first appears in Jimmy Olsen, of all things. I mean, that's the funny thing is that
you can trace it all the way back to there, but really is really. Yeah, and I agree with Clifton, the idea that, if not for the superpowers team, Galactic Guardian show, that, that's where a lot of people were introduced to Darkseid. But I think, I don't, if I think of arch enemies, like even from since I was a kid, it's always been Luthor. Like they have, there's just such a, and it's not really, it's almost, it's not really, I don't think Superman hates him, but I know Lex hates Superman.
Yeah.
There's definitely a hatred towards Superman, definitely. And when you go look at the origin from, and this is what they based almost the entirety of Smallville on, was just this whole idea that, they go back to the fact that at one point they were friendly, and then, there's an accident. Lex doesn't look at it as an accident. Some people look at it as Lex, had this chemical that not only made his hair fall out, but it affected his brain chemistry. Some people think that's what happened, and that's why. But yeah, it's a rivalry. It's a friendship turned bad, and then it's never gotten good again.
Yeah, in some versions.
Mm-hmm.
In some versions, yeah. I mean, we should touch upon that. There are some versions where, they grew up together in Smallville, like the show,
right? Like
that is pulled from the comics, from a certain era of comics, and then the John Byrne Man of Steel and everything kind of the post-crisis stuff strips that away, and they don't meet until adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't meet until Clark goes to Metropolis and starts becoming Superman.
Right. Yeah. There's much more of a Luthor is the kind of the top dog in Metropolis until Superman gets there, and then it's kind of he starts monkeying around with what Lex is trying to do, which is not good. And then the other thing is just the idea that people are, instead of looking up to see the L build, that big L-shaped building that Lex has got, now they're looking up to see Superman, and that doesn't sit well with Lex at all.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan of going back to at least the Silver Age for sure. I've always loved the whole Luthor ranting and how he's in his prison grays up through the purple and green costume and the armor and stuff. I've always been a fan of the character, and I just think that when he's played well, when he's not just a throwaway, we got to have something with Lex. When someone actually thinks a really good Lex plot, I'm always good with it.
Yeah, me too.
I was introduced to the Lex backstory from Super Friends, where they cover them as kids together in Smallville. It's a classic episode where he's doing his science experiments in a shed or something.
Right.
And then there's a cloud of smoke, and then all his hair starts falling out. And I remember being horrified by that when I was a kid. I was scarred by that.
Right.
And then I saw that episode a ton of times.
Yeah. Well, the comic has a bit where Clark, Superboy blows, tries to blow the smoke or the chemicals out.
Yeah, that's what it is in the
so it's the
Super
same
Friends
thing?
episode as well.
Okay.
They adapted that directly.
Gotcha.
Where he's trying to put the fire out, and it just blows the chemical smoke onto Lex.
And
then that's what causes his hair to fall out.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Like in the story, they're friends, and like Lex is even trying to find a cure for kryptonite.
Yeah, I think that is the direct adaptation in the Super
Okay.
Friends.
All right,
Yeah.
well, yep, same story.
That's a neat story. What I don't like about it, though, is I don't like that it can color Lex's motivation to be revenge driven.
Mm-hmm.
And the version I like is I like that Lex hatred of Superman is motivated completely only by the fact that Superman exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just there, and it bothers me because what there was a quote that I heard. I think it might have been the guy who wrote Justice. Help me out. The guy from the Alex Ross book,
Jim Kruger.
Yeah. I think it was Jim Kruger. I said that I heard say it, where he was saying Lex has done everything you possibly can to be super already. He's done everything a regular person can to be super. And then there's this guy that comes down, right? And is just super by, by what by his genealogy, really. Like he's just sort of born with this stuff.
Right.
Essentially, when he comes here. And I think that that's interesting to me. Lex is a fascinating character for me. And Clifton, you and I have gone back and forth on this, where there is a sliver of him where he believes in the power of humanity.
Right.
But there is also that is not front and center ahead of his own self-serving greed.
Right. Yeah. Like that gets played up a lot, where it's basically they portray his belief that like if Superman wasn't here doing this stuff, like mankind would be so much better if we're not relying on this alien to do this stuff for us. We'd be doing this stuff ourselves. I would be saving the world if Superman wasn't here, and he's just messing it up.
Yep.
And I see people put that out there a lot, and I only believe it to a point. I believe it to a point that is something that Lex tells himself.
Yeah.
But that is not the truth.
Right.
That's just Lex's self-justification to justify the evil stuff he wants to do anyway.
Yeah.
That he's just making a forced self-fabrication like people do to justify what they want to do and try to make it moral and noble. I think that's where I take that.
I think he does. Yeah. I think he does on some level believe that.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I think that there are figures in humanity that Lex idolizes. And I think that they are, the great scientists of the past and the great mathematicians and the people that have done stuff and the people that have helped humanity. I think that he does see himself as one of those people.
Right. Like where I take it though is that as far as him being an alien, like if Lex were only facing off against Batman, like he'd still hate Batman.
Right, right.
Because Batman's stopping him from doing evil stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but what's interesting to me is I think that the power of humanity is also in some way an egotistical thing, because he's like, I believe in the power of humanity because I'm a human and I've done these things. Right? Right. You know what I mean? And so I do think his ego's like all kind of rolled into it. And that's what I like. I like how complex he is, but it's said perfectly in All-Star Superman. One of the best Superman stories of all time, where Superman's basically like, Lex, if you wanted to save humanity, if you wanted to do all these great things, you would have by now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason I remember at the time was it's almost the exact same thing that Morrison says in Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4 to Doom. So that's why I'm like, I like both of the scenes, but they're pretty much the exact same scene. Because I think it's the same.
And that is a great Fantastic Four book.
I'm not arguing that. That's it. That's not my argument. It is a great Fantastic Four book.
I'm just recommending it to people if they haven't checked it out.
Sure, of course, by all means, check the book out. But there's a scene, almost the exact same scene, where I think it's Sue that calls Victor on his nonsense and says, "You could have done the same thing, where basically you could fix everything if you wanted to." But
yeah, there's like almost like a Captain Ahab aspect to it, where like Superman is his white whale on some level, and he's and he's an obsessive character, which I think is interesting. But what I also think is interesting about Lex, what he brings to the table, is he brings a philosophy that maybe everyone else should be thinking deep down. It's right, and it is a little bit like, why should we trust a guy who could see through walls?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
And I like that there is obviously it's Superman's purity and everything that, makes him trustworthy. But I like that there's somebody who can embody that other side of the opinion and be like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
Like,
Right. Like we're so into Superman's character. We see
Right.
that he's trustworthy, but it totally makes sense in the world that everybody be like, wait a second.
Yep.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's not a bad idea. Like that's the thing in like, say, Superman, Batman, Dawn of Justice League stuff, that it's not, it's not a bad idea that after the first one, after Man of Steel and how destroyed Metropolis gets and, all those people die, why would you think that Superman's a force for good necessarily?
Right.
That the way that character's portrayed, is it's not exactly traditional Superman stuff. And it's, it's a lot of, some people have described it as disaster porn, and I wouldn't go that far, but I would say definitely it's not the same old, I'm here to help. I'm a friend. I'm here to help out.
Mm-hmm.
I may be from, a million miles away.
Right.
I mean, I just look at it as what he would do with those powers.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he can't look past it to that degree.
Yeah.
He's just like, no, like if I had those things, I would do this. I would do that, like,
Right.
like, so why would anybody else like not think differently? And I do think that it's neat that the philosophy like kind of boils down to that.
Right.
It's that like Superman's willing to help people and Lex is only willing to help people if it serves his own needs first.
Right.
Yeah. I do like it when there's I will say one of my favorite, when I think about Lex, I'm when I think about performance wise stuff, I think of, Clancy's is really hard to beat for me.
Yeah. It's in the animated series stuff.
Yeah. I'm talking about the animated, like throughout the animated series stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think Clancy is just phenomenal as Lex. And
That's Clancy Brown, who played the Kurgan in Highlander, of course.
Right. Yeah. And a million other, he's been in a million things.
Other things.
He's a million other things, but he's great as Lex Luthor. I love him for that. If he didn't do anything else, that'd be enough. But he's so good at that. And then I think, I like the Gene Hackman from the Richard Donner movie. I like him. I like Rosenbaum. I think Rosenbaum is a good Lex Luthor. If it hadn't been, so angst-ridden, I think he would have been one of the top performances.
Mm-hmm.
He could play that haunted young Lex well, though.
He did. He absolutely did. I'm not, there's no doubt there that he got, when I think about Lex stuff that I like, I just think it for, as a villain, as a foil for Superman. But what I was thinking about performances, one of the ones that doesn't really get talked about is I don't even know the actor who does the voice in it's the Ruby Spears Superman, and I've talked about it before on the podcast, but it's right around the same time of Adventures of Superman with Marv Wolfman, and then Byrne is on Action and Superman, and you've got the whole businessman Luthor thing going on. And the way the character's played in the Ruby Spears Superman is he just thinks Superman is a dullard and talks to him like it's not so much like I've got my evil plan, I'm doing my thing. It's a lot of like, no, you're just like, you're just a couple steps behind and you're always gonna be.
Yeah.
And I really, really like that thought process because it's almost like, I got to deal with you.
Yep.
It's and we don't see. I don't think we see enough of It's either a lot of times it's either, I'm so much smarter than you. You'll it's either Superman, I hate you, or it's not. It's never a good balance between the two. And that's one of the ones I love because it's a nice bit of, I got my stuff going on, but at the same time, I really don't have to worry about you because I can outthink you at any point.
I don't, in my opinion, I don't think that we've gotten the best of the character in live action yet.
Okay.
I don't. I with all due respect to Rosenbaum and Gene Hackman and, Jesse Eisenberg and Ducky.
Cryer was great.
You know what I mean? I actually haven't seen the stuff with Supergirl where
Cryer was fun. I like Cryer.
Yeah,
I thought Cryer did a good job.
Yeah,
I thought Cryer did a good job.
But it's it's not not necessarily in any of the performances. I think it's in the writing. I just think it's in the writing for all of those movies and stuff like that, where it's like I like a Lex that sees stuff coming, right?
Sure.
And I don't really like clownish Lex. And the one bit that I actually like from the Christopher Reeve movies is the moments where he lures him to the skyscraper with the hypersonic. Like, I'm like, that's Lex. Like, that's the Lex I knew growing up, right? Because, I'm a little young to have seen those movies when they came out, right? But you know,
Right.
the Lex that I knew, the billionaire combination, mad scientist, business mogul,
Right.
right? Who sees everything coming, who's tactical in that way, like that. That's the moment to me. That's Lex.
Right.
I'm just going to give a shout out to the Ruby Spears Lex Luthor from the 1988 Superman cartoon, since you mentioned it, Frank. He was played by Michael Bell,
Okay.
who was quite a prolific voice
Yeah.
actor throughout the years, even still active, but was Quackerjack on Darkwing Duck.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
He's Duke from G.I. Joe, isn't he?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yep.
He was Handy Smurf
Okay.
and All-Star Snork.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was around a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I knew he was like a guy that had been through a lot, had done a lot of stuff. But yeah, he was great as Lex. He was a lot of fun.
Prowl, Sideswipe, and Scrapper.
Okay.
Nice. Oh, I love Scrapper.
And yep, Duke, Blowtorch, Lift Ticket.
Oh, wow. There you go. Okay. Yeah, so he's still active because when they did, there's an episode of Community it takes place in the animated G.I. Joe world, and he's Duke in it. So
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, no, that's great. I didn't realize it was him, but
Yep.
yeah, I knew he's somebody that was pretty prolific. I did heard the voice seems similar now that you say it. It's like, oh yeah, it was definitely the guy who did do it.
All right. So let's move on to Lois then.
All right.
So why would it be Lois? Why would Lois be the most important to Superman's world?
I think Lois Lane is the one that grounds Superman more to humanity, even possibly than the Kents.
Okay.
Because I mean, they're his parents, but Lois Lane is as a love interest, as a friend, as a confidant, as a competitor in different tellings. I think she's the one that makes Clark feel even more human, that grounds him even more.
Right.
Okay.
So I mean, that's definitely what I like about her.
Yeah.
That she definitely puts him in his place in most of the versions, which is always fun.
Right. Well, it's funny. It's one of those things where when I was like, when getting back to like the most recent stuff, which is the Superman and Lois stuff, there's definitely a bit where some people were complaining about the fact there wasn't much for her to do in the first episode, and I'm like, well, that'd cover a lot of ground.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in the second one, not to spoil anything, but there's a moment where she's, they're going back and forth about what she's getting into. And she basically says, hey, go do your Superman thing, and I'm going to go do my Lois Lane thing. And I think that's an important bit, too, is the idea that, we've talked about it before, but just the idea that she's got, as much as he's got stuff going on as being Superman and being Clark, she definitely has her own world that she inhabits and things that she's into and things that she's championing. And I think a lot of times, while we know about it, we just don't see enough of it.
Right. I'm so sick of hearing like this person doesn't get enough, like when it's a TV show.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've been watching TV for many, many, many years. And I just know at this point that, if somebody's a little light in one episode, that they're going to get a focus down the line, especially when the show is named after her.
Right. Right. Of course. Right. Yeah. And that's what I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a reason why it's and Lois and it's not, just Superman. Like I get that too.
She's got some cool bits in there, right? Like it's only been 2 episodes from the moment we're recording. So, when this comes out, I think the third will be out.
Right.
But, I was watching it with my wife too. And like Lois had a hell yeah moment too, where I said out loud to the screen, I'm like, you don't F with Lois Lane. And, and my wife was like, yep. I know, right? And I'm like, and Lois is like one of my favorite characters in all of comics.
Right.
And I say this, I say that she is my favorite female superhero. And I know that sounds weird because she's not a superhero. But there's a bit in New Frontier, the Darwin Cook, Silver Age love letter, Elseworlds, where he has Lois as a reporter overseas covering the Korean War. And I think this was like in the commentary of the DVD or something. He was like, really at the time, there would be no way a female reporter would have been overseas in a war zone covering it. Right. He's like, so, I do have to say that, I'm not like really representing the time well there by this, but he's like, in my head, if Lois Lane was a real person and she existed in that time, she would be there. And that was the moment. I'm like, yep. I'm like, absolutely. Like, yeah, like she is she's kind of a Batman. She's kind of an Alfred now. Like she's like good at everything.
Right. She's that exceptional a character.
Yeah.
Like that's just what the character would be doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it's funny you say that, because it's one of those things where, when I'm asked about more modern Superman stuff, I'm always pushing the Peter Tomasi, I think it's Doug Mahnke Superman series. It was out fairly recently. It was out of Rebirth Superman book, and I say it should have been Superman Family, because it's Clark and Lois and young Jonathan Kent, Superboy.
Mhm.
But one of the things I loved about Tomasi's take on that family dynamic is that no matter what the situation was, no matter what, was going on with Clark, whatever, whether they were in Smallville, Metropolis, wherever, Lois just was like, okay, and adapted to the moment, like, no problem. Like one point, I think one of my favorite issues is one where it's like, it's Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. And if you've read the DC stuff with Frankenstein in it. And it's kind of like Lois just rolls with, oh yeah, this is my life.
Right.
This is just how things are. And it's not even like a self-referential or like, oh, I realize. No, she just in the moment is comfortable with the fact that that's what's going on, and that she's, I think the bride, like, it's basically like I almost remember the scene being that the bride and Lois talk about relationships, which again sounds like a whacked out scene, but Lois is totally comfortable in it. And it doesn't seem contrived. It doesn't seem like, well, it works perfectly.
That's the world they live in.
Yeah.
Right. And she's perfectly comfortable in that. And there's another one where like Lois, being, when you think about the fact that Lois is an army brat and she's probably lived a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
There's a moment where she has to take it, like basically fly a helicopter. And it's one of those things where you may say, oh, it's so far-fetched. It's not far-fetched, because I think it's like Lois would probably have that knowledge from some point in her life. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So but yeah, Tomasi's take on, if you're looking for really good, especially with Superman and Lois coming out, and we're only on we're coming out up on the third episode. If you want to enjoy more of that stuff, I would highly recommend Peter Tomasi's run on Superman.
I think in a weird way that she's almost like tougher than Superman is. In a weird way. I think she doesn't have power, right? But I think she can handle more. It's right. Weird, right? We're like
she's as brave, but doesn't have the powers.
Yeah.
To fall back on.
And I think more stuff gets to him where she's a little bit more cynical than he is, which I think is also interesting too. So when I was saying like Lex is sort of the philosophy that maybe we should all be thinking, right? Lois, I think, is sometimes the philosophy for Superman. I think maybe you should be thinking this sometimes, or Clark. Like you, right. And I like that they bounce off of each other that way, where she's kind of a realist and kind of isn't as hopeful as he is, but and they can kind of like play off of each other that way.
Yeah, I mean for me that goes all the way back to like the Margot Kidder stuff, because she's very much at that point she's not really. I don't think the Smallville stuff comes till later. Like she's calling them Smallville till later,
right?
But
yeah,
that definitely is one of those things where even then she's kind of like. You don't really understand how things work in the big city, country mouse kind of a thing with Clark. And I agree with you. I love the fact that a lot of times what I love about their relationship is also the fact that she's able to, she doesn't henpeck him. She doesn't have to smack him upside the head. She just basically says, no, this is what, you're not realizing, you're not seeing is this. And it works. And then at the same time, she's in awe of the fact, not so much that he has the powers, but like you said, just how hopeful he is.
Yeah.
Even if she doesn't agree that that's what he should be thinking. Yeah. I love that bit. I love that part of their relationship too.
I do too. And I like that they can kind of push each other to be a little bit more each other. In that instance. I think that she's inspired by his hopefulness, but at the same time, like he's a little bit smarter and more effective because of her mindset on things as well.
Right.
And I'm not all the way through it, but I started reading the Event Leviathan stuff that Bendis was writing, that big event.
Right.
And I like that Batman is teaming up with Lois.
Right.
It's one of those things. It's like I just kind of chuckle at that, where it's almost like they're more alike than he right. and Superman are. Like she's almost easier to work with. Because like they relate to each other better.
I mean, they've never really come out and said, I mean, while she solves kind of like mystery stuff every once in a while, like she'll have, like, especially when she had her own book, there were a lot more situations where she was, it wasn't always just, I'm trying to figure out who Superman is, or I'm trying to marry Superman. There were stuff where she had issues where she was trying to, like solve a mystery. And then, again, getting back to the Superman family, when it was more of that kind of book, she would take on a role for a piece she was writing, and then it would turn into, so and so is bumping somebody off, or so and so is embezzling money, and she would have to figure out, do the reporter bit, and try to figure that out. So I think it lends itself to the idea, especially in Event Leviathan, where you're trying to put all those. That's the one with all the detectives together, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So that she would fit in well with those people that can look at the evidence and the big picture, and then distill it down to what it's supposed to be.
Right.
I think that makes. That makes made a lot of sense in that book.
And I like the cliche Superman, truth, justice, and the American way, but I like when somebody spelled it out to me that the truth in there is the journalism aspect.
Uh-huh.
And that's that also, that's Lois's role, but that's also like Clark is a reporter's role. Like that's how they work that angle of whatever I call it, the creed, the code, whatever,
Right.
So, all right. So we're running out of time, but so let's get Jimmy. Let's get Jimmy in here. Let's give Jimmy Olsen some love. So why would he be the most important? He is one of the most prolific characters in all of comics.
Right.
Right.
Like he really is. Like, I mean, just on sheer number of appearances.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, he hasn't had a regular book in a while. He gets like a special, or there's a focus on him, or there's a mini.
Well, there was recently wasn't it Matt Fraction?
Was it not?
Yeah.
I thought it was like a 12-issue maxi series. What it was.
I'm not sure. I just knew it was recently he had a run.
Okay. But I'm saying he hasn't had a regular book since the 60s.
Right. No, he's underappreciated.
Sure.
As a character, he 100% is, I think,
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where, a lot of times it was just to introduce something bizarre. And I say bizarre in in the best way. You get giant turtle Jimmy, or you get porcupine Jimmy, or werewolf Jimmy, or genie Jimmy.
Yeah.
And you got to see an aspect of, the signal watches I thought wasn't always a cool idea, because it just, it led to the idea that Superman isn't always aware of what's going on everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's important too. It's the tricky part with writing Superman, I think, in creating the character, is that you do find yourself in instances. I find it even watching Superman and Lois, where I'm there are moments where I'm shouldn't he be able to hear that? Can he hear that? Can he not hear that? What, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I like that the signal watch that, for those that don't know, it was a Silver Age thing that kind of, it creeps up sometimes, where, Jimmy Olsen as Superman's pal had a watch that whenever Jimmy was in trouble, he would flick a switch on it and it would emit a hypersonic noise that only Superman could hear. And it would let him know that Jimmy's in trouble and I got to go help out.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is important about Jimmy is Jimmy sees Superman the way the public does.
Okay.
He's that window, right? Because he is Superman's pal, but he doesn't know his identity in most versions. He doesn't know really all that much about his personal life.
Right.
You know what I mean? But he is, he believes in him. He's his biggest fan, right? And for a story like Death of Superman, that's sort of one of the most well-known Superman stories of all time, I don't think that story works without Jimmy.
Yeah.
Right? Because Lois mourns him as a love interest.
Right.
The Kents mourn him as parents. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy mourns him as, we just lost, he does mourn him as a friend, but it's also we just lost Earth's greatest savior. Right? And this is a big deal. 100%. I think Jimmy is the conduit for how the rest of the world feels about Superman in that moment.
Yeah. No, I think the thing with Jimmy for me has always just been the idea of, he's Superman's pal, but I think it was one of those things where I've always appreciated Jimmy, but at the same time I look as it's not really played that much unless you got the Superman's just being a jerk on a cover or something. But it was almost always, what's Jimmy into this week or this month?
Right.
You get some of that too, but it's not. I think the reader was supposed to feel that way more than Superman was. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. Jimmy Olsen certainly had some of the craziest Silver Age stories there are in the super crazy Silver Age.
Right.
Yep.
In his Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen book, like every week, like you touched on it, Frank, like he was always being turned into a giant reptile, like a Godzilla, or getting superpowers. One of my favorites was when Jimmy went back in time to ancient Israel and started playing Beatles songs.
Right.
And like that was in a story titled "The Red-Headed Beetle of 1000 BC."
Sure.
It's like the movie Yesterday, where nobody had ever heard of the Beatles except this one guy remembered the Beatles and becomes like a huge star just doing Beatles stuff.
Right.
Jimmy Olsen did that in 1000 BC.
Right.
He went back and introduced Beatlemania to them.
Right. In like 1964 in the comics.
In the comics, yeah.
Sure, because of course he did.
Yeah.
Right. That's just what he was doing every month in his book.
Yeah.
There was it was in the Nick Spencer like backup book, like stories that got kind of like traded into like an 80-page giant that Clifton, you brought up in one of our favorite single issues bit. And what I like about that is you get to see how other people see Jimmy, and I like the take on him there.
Right.
Where if it is the guy that gets to hang out with Superman and go on all these crazy adventures and has all these things to have been like happen to him, Jimmy would be the coolest guy in the room.
Right.
Like he would be the guy with the most stories. Like, there's that time I got turned into a giant ape.
Right. Well, I think to a certain point, at some point, Jimmy would just again be more unflappable than Lois, I would think.
Right.
After all the stuff that he's been through.
It was one of the things in the early Supergirl seasons when it was CBS and CW, and they had McCat Brooks as James Olsen, as the grown-up Jimmy Olsen. I was like, one thing I really liked about that is that he played it confident. He played it as like on the same level as Supergirl. Like he wasn't, a sidekick or anything. Like they were pretty much on the same level. And I was like, I'm like, this is a grown-up guy who hung out with Superman all the time. Like he'd be confident, like he'd be able to handle himself by that point in like when he's older.
Right.
There's
a bit in the Hitchcock movie Rear Window that makes me think of Jimmy Olsen every time I watch it. And Rear Window is the movie that you guys have seen spoofed a million times. The guy, with the broken leg in the wheelchair that's watching his neighbors through the binoculars, and in the opening of that movie, Jimmy Stewart's a photographer in that movie, and you see like a pan over like his night table or something like that, and you see the picture that he took that you're supposed to infer where he got his broken leg. And it's this like horrendous, like he's out on the racetrack during this like, car pileup that's coming like right in front of him. And there's like a car that's like flipped over upside down, like, right. And it's this funny thing that makes you laugh. But I think about that and I'm like, that's Jimmy to me. That's like Jimmy will be on the railroad tracks
right
as the train is coming to get the perfect shot and then jump away in the last second. Like, so I think that is one of those things. I do think that he is as brave as Lois is in those moments. You don't see it done as much, but like it is an angle I would like to see a little bit more sometimes.
Sure.
I love Jimmy.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's go around really quick. So let's, so who's our vote out of the four? You got it narrowed down to one yet, Frank?
I think I'm still sticking with the Kents.
Okay. You're sticking with the Kents. Clifton, what about you?
With the Kents.
I'm going with Lois Lane.
Okay. Tommy, what about you?
Oh, definitely Lois Lane.
Yeah, I'm between Lois and the Kents, but
Lois is super in her own right.
Right, exactly.
If Superman didn't exist, Lois would still be the best woman possible. She's well renowned. She's smart in her own regard. She figures things out. She's everything Clark wants to be as a journalist. She has a pick of the world.
Right. You brought up an angle that we didn't touch upon, and I like that the Superman and Lois plays off of this. Is that Superman? You're right, is famous on her own.
Yeah.
Not just as the woman that Superman saves all the time, which you sometimes can see in the comics and in other stuff somewhere. And I like that. Like, no. Like, she herself on merit is the most famous reporter in the world.
Right.
Yeah. She's justified at a young age. Lex gives her respect. Perry gives her respect. Everybody around her respects who she is and what she does. She's at the top of her game at the youngest possible way she can be. So Superman is lucky to be with her.
Right.
And it's just now that they're like, if you look at the animated movies that came out, like Justice League Apocalypse, she's coordinating everything.
Yeah.
Because she has that. It's now they're starting to show her intelligence. Of course, what Frank says earlier, that before she's played as, the comical get him to marry me trope as what that age would provide as to how women are portrayed. But the more you look at her character and see how she reacts and what she is, she's so much more than that. And Superman is her gateway into that. But without Superman being there, she still fights for a better world.
Yeah. All right. So 1 vote for the Kents, 2 votes for Lois. I want to say the Kents so bad. I love the Kents. I love them so much. Really, I love all of these characters. I mean, all of these characters are some of my favorite in all of comic books. This is why I love Superman, is the supporting stuff. But I got to go with Lois. Like, I can't think of a Superman story without her.
Right.
Like, it's just not the same, you know?
And she should have been given more opportunities in the comics to tell her own story. We did just recently have the Lois Lane run of comics by Greg Rucka and Mike Perkins, but it was one of those things where I'm like, how did it take this long?
I know.
Like, how did it take that long to get them?
She's a superhero. Like I said, like, and I love Wonder Woman too, but like I can name more amazing Lois Lane stories than I can Wonder Woman. Just so yeah, Lois is great. Lois is awesome. Okay, so we're gonna cool down. So in our Joker, Catwoman, Robin episode, what we did was we went around and we said, like, okay, like, who's the next most important after those 3? So we'll do the same for Superman. Like, who's the 5th most important supporting character? But first, if you like the show, you can check out all of our episodes on YouTube and letmeknowhowitis.com. Just please, however you find us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Finally, if there's anything you would like us to discuss, you can leave a topic suggestion on Twitter or in the comments. Our Twitter handle is our show's initials, LMKHII. Okay, so who wants to kick us off? Who's number 5?
Crypto, the super dog.
Okay. I don't think you're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
Okay.
Like, as far as like most important, I don't know. As far as my favorite, Crypto, the super dog.
Okay.
So it is my legitimate choice for my favorite 5th edition to the Superman universe. And I think it's a great idea. I think like it's fun seeing a dog with superpowers. I love that in the Silver Age, like they went with it.
Yeah.
And like it just does expand the Superman world to how crazy it can be. Like we were talking about in the Jimmy Olsen books, like and Lois Lane interacting with Frankenstein. Like that's just the world they live in. Like this is what happens.
Yep.
And there's a really fun in Titan season 2, there's a really fun moment with their version of Crypto where you're like, he's super and just a dog still. So like, I love that they show that stuff.
There's an awesome Morrison quote too, where he was like, he was talking about, I think it was a panel we were at, Clifton, at New York Comic Con, where he was talking about like writing Superman. And he was like, what I'd like to do is I like to just take like mundane, normal things and just up it. So it's like going out walking your dog. Well, that's what he's doing. Just to him, he's walking him past Saturn.
Right.
And like, I love that image in my head.
Yeah, there's so much great stuff with Crypto.
Yeah. All right. 1 vote for Crypto. Who's next?
I'm kind of torn between Supergirl and Lana.
Ooh. Okay.
I like Lana because Lana shows Smallville.
Mm-hmm.
It shows how he's not perfect.
Yeah.
How he was just learning, things of that nature. I mean, it just humanizes him a little more to throw Lana into it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. She knows Clark before the cape.
Right.
Yeah.
Even and she knows all about him. She's another confidant to him.
Mm-hmm.
she shares the same weight as the Kents, except it's more of a peer.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they don't mine it out as much with Lana. But Lana is there during those times for him.
Yeah. Okay. And then Supergirl.
Well, Supergirl, just because.
Okay.
It's just a little twist on it. I just like the fact of more than one person left Krypton as opposed to everyone died.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It just seems he's not alone as you would think.
Right.
I think she's important too in the sense that she's the only person in the world that knows what it's like to be him.
Yes.
You know? And it's also doing Superman stuff, but like as a teenage girl with her too, which I think is just, also interesting.
And another interesting thing, just how they portray her usually as being both older and younger than Superman because of how accidents happened in space. That she left when she was a teenage girl and was suspended and arrives as a teenage girl. That she actually has memories of Krypton.
Yeah,
like she's kind of a lifeline to Krypton for Superman there. Like she can tell him like how it actually was growing up there.
Yeah.
Which is the only other like first person accounts he can get.
Yeah. It's so funny. Tommy, you picked the exact two that I was also like, I'm stuck on these two. I don't know. I'm torn between the two of them too. Yeah.
So many great characters.
Oh, I know, man. God, Superman's so awesome. That world is so great. All right, Frank, who's yours?
I think everyone knows what mine is.
Bibbo?
No. Yes. No. I love Bibbo,
Legion,
but no.
The Legion of Superheroes.
Of course. It's a Legion of Superheroes.
You were dying for it. You were dying to bring it up.
Yes, it's a Legion. I know some of us don't think the Legion is necessary to Superman's background. I disagree. I love the idea of him knowing that, oh yeah, this all works out. There's going to be a superhero club of teenagers 1,000 years in the future that think you did a great job. It makes, and I like the idea of him being with a peer group that makes him feel less alone.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that aspect of it too. Even though we've talked about it before that they haze him to start with. They put him through trials that he can't possibly win, and he's dejected and sad. And they're like, "No, we're just kidding. You're part of our group now."
Yeah.
And just quick summary for Legion of Superheroes for anyone who might not know: they're a team of superpowered teenagers from the future, from across all of the solar system, different planets when different planets have been colonized, who are so inspired by Superman that they become superheroes, then travel back in time to meet Superboy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like it's the idea of if you're putting together your team of Justice League members and then you went back and got King Arthur to be part of your group,
right?
I mean, it's one of those things where like, oh, I love King Arthur or Robin Hood. If you couldn't get Green Arrow, you'd go get what you'd go get whoever you're if these characters existed, obviously. But it's one of those things where I always love that bit. I like the idea of him having someone, and the idea that he's part of two very important groups in two different not centuries, but two different years and thousands of years apart, that he's influential and a part of. It just speaks more to his legacy of being an influential character. So I would say the Legion, even though the Legion can stand on its own.
Yeah, we talk about Justice League Unlimited a lot. We don't talk about the Legion of Superheroes cartoon enough.
We don't,
which is also very fun and great.
Yes.
You guys should check out if it's on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
If it's on HBO Max, is it even there right now? I know it was on DC Universe. I know.
I'm not sure it is,
but we're checking out if it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, very good. Yeah,
yep.
So many great characters too. I'm going to throw Steel out too. You want to know why? Because I love Steel. I think Steel is so underrated. Also,
sure.
So I'm just waiting for when that character blows up. It's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So tell us your opinion in the comments. You can always hit us up on Twitter as well. As always, we'll post links and examples to everything we talk about on letmeknowhowitis.com. Please remember to like us and follow us on social media. And thanks for being here, everyone. We'll see you next time.